Chapter 1. The first glimpse of the shadow. The night was eerily silent, the air thick with an unexplainable tension. As Elara stepped into the dimly lit corridor of her ancestral home, a strange sensation washed over her. She could feel something watching her, something lurking in the corners of her vision. The grand mirror at the end of the hallway stood ominously, its surface rippling as if it were a pool disturbed by an unseen force. Elara hesitated, her breath hitching as a shadow flickered across the mirror. It wasn't her reflection. This figure was taller, its features obscured by a shifting darkness. She stepped closer, heart pounding in her chest, trying to rationalize what she had seen. The candle in her hand flickered violently, casting elongated shadows along the walls. The air grew colder, and a whisper, barely audible, sent a chill down her spine. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice barely above a whisper. No answer. Only the silence of the old house, broken by the creaking of the wooden floor beneath her feet. Her fingers trembled as she reached out towards the mirror, the cold surface sending a jolt up her arm. And then, in a blink, the shadow was gone, leaving only her own pale reflection staring back at her. But something had changed. Her reflection wasn't quite right. The eyes staring back weren't entirely her own. They held a darkness, a depth that sent fear clawing at her throat. She stumbled backward, the candle slipping from her grasp as the room was momentarily swallowed by darkness. Elara scrambled to pick up the candle, but before she could relight it, a soft rustling sound echoed through the hallway. She turned sharply, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Was it just the wind, or had something moved in the shadows? Her instincts told her to run, but something held her in place, an invisible force that kept her rooted before the mirror. The temperature in the corridor dropped even further. She could see her breath now, forming ghostly white puffs in the air. Then, from the depths of the mirror, a whisper emerged again, clearer this time, though still distant. Elara. Her name. The sound of it sent a jolt through her spine. She whirled around, searching the darkened hallway for a sign of another presence. But she was alone, or at least she should have been. A sudden gust of air whooshed past her, extinguishing the small flame that she had managed to relight. The oppressive silence returned, broken only by the faint creaking of the house settling. But Elara knew better. Something else was in the house with her, lurking just beyond her sight. Summoning her courage, she took another step toward the mirror. She had to see, had to know what was hiding within its depths. As she reached out once more, her fingers barely brushing the glass, a wave of nausea overcame her. A dizzying sensation gripped her mind, and for a brief second, she felt as though she were being pulled forward, into the mirror itself. She yanked her hand back, stumbling away. Her heart pounded against her rib cage, and the realization hit her like a crashing wave. The mirror wasn't just reflecting her image, it was watching her, and worse, it wanted her. Chapter 2. The Mystery of the Mirror. Elara couldn't shake the unsettling feeling from the night before. The mirror had seemed alive, sentient even. She had barely slept, haunted by the whispers that had drifted from its depths. Now, in the light of day, she stood before it once more, searching for signs of the unnatural presence she had felt. The surface of the mirror was smooth, flawless, reflecting her room in perfect detail. But as she leaned in closer, she noticed something strange. Her reflection was delayed, as though it were moving just a fraction of a second behind her real self. A chill ran down her spine. Was it just her imagination? Determined to understand the truth, she placed her palm flat against the glass. The moment her skin made contact, a deep vibration resonated from the mirror, sending a wave of cold up her arm. She gasped and yanked her hand back, but a faint outline of her palm remained imprinted on the surface, as if the mirror had absorbed her touch. Then the whispering started again. This time, it wasn't distant. It was clear, almost urgent. "Elara, help us, trapped, beyond." Her breath hitched. The voice was soft, layered, as if multiple whispers overlapped each other. She glanced over her shoulder to see if someone was in the room with her, but she was alone. She turned back to the mirror and, to her horror, saw that her reflection was no longer mirroring her movements. Instead, it was standing still, staring at her with wide, pleading eyes. Then, slowly, it raised its hand and pressed it against the glass, mirroring the imprint that had been left behind. Elara stumbled back, knocking over a chair in her panic. Her reflection didn't move, didn't blink. It simply stared, its eyes filled with a silent desperation. Then its lips parted, and though no sound escaped, Elara knew what it was saying. "Help me." The room spun, and Elara clutched the edge of her desk for support. What was happening? Was she losing her mind? Or was the mirror truly something more than an ordinary piece of glass? She had to find answers. Taking a deep breath, she forced herself to step closer once more. If there were spirits trapped within the mirror, she needed to understand why, and, more importantly, if they could get out. But as she reached forward again, the reflection changed. The pleading eyes turned hollow, the mouth stretched into an unnatural grin, and the figure within the glass lunged forward as if trying to break free. Elara screamed and stumbled away just as a loud crack split through the air. A jagged fracture ran down the center of the mirror, distorting her reflection into something monstrous. The whispering grew louder, an eerie chorus of voices overlapping in a desperate cry. And then, as suddenly as it had started, everything went silent. The mirror was still again, the reflection normal except for the single crack running down its center, a mark of something broken, something awakening. Elara knew then that the mystery of the mirror was far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. Chapter 3. Trapped in the Labyrinth. Elara's vision blurred as she felt the world around her shift. One moment she had been staring at the mirror's fractured surface. The next, she was falling, plunging through an endless void of swirling darkness. Her scream was lost in the abyss, swallowed by the deafening silence that surrounded her. Then, with a jarring impact, she landed hard on a cold, stone floor. The air was thick with dust, the scent of age and decay pressing against her senses. She groaned, pushing herself up, and gasped as she took in her surroundings. She was no longer in her bedroom. Towering stone walls rose around her, twisting into a labyrinth that stretched endlessly into the distance. Faint blue torches lined the corridor, their flames flickering without warmth. Shadows danced wildly, stretching and contorting as though they had a life of their own. A low, echoing whisper drifted through the air. "You must find the way before it finds you." Elara's pulse pounded. Who was speaking, and what was it? She turned a corner cautiously, only to find the path behind her closing in. The walls shifted with a slow grinding sound, reshaping the maze with each step she took. Panic set in. Was the labyrinth alive? She had to move. Her footsteps echoed as she ran, her heart thundering in her chest. Every turn she took seemed to lead her deeper into the maze, its walls pulsing as if breathing. The whispers grew louder, some pleading, some warning, but none making sense. Was she trapped here forever? Then, in the distance, she saw it. Her own reflection moving within the stone, flickering like a mirage. But this reflection wasn't copying her movements. It was ahead of her, watching. It raised a hand, pointing toward something behind her. A shiver ran down Elara's spine. She slowly turned, and her breath caught in her throat. A dark figure, its form shifting like a living shadow, loomed in the distance. Its hollow eyes locked onto hers, and the air grew deathly cold. It let out a sound, not a whisper, not a growl, but something in between, something ancient and hungry. The chase had begun. Chapter 4. A Lost Soul. Elara's breath came in ragged gasps as she sprinted through the twisting corridors of the labyrinth. The air was thick with an eerie silence, broken only by the distant, hollow echoes of her own footsteps. Her mind reeled, struggling to process the impossibility of her situation. Had the mirror truly transported her here? Was this some nightmarish illusion, or had she stepped into a reality far beyond her understanding? The path ahead twisted sharply, leading her into a grand chamber lined with ancient crumbling statues. Their hollow eyes seemed to follow her, their frozen expressions twisted in anguish. At the center of the room stood a pedestal, and atop it rested a small, ornate mirror. Unlike the one in her home, this mirror's surface was murky, as if veiled in mist. A strange compulsion pulled her toward it. Her fingers trembled as she reached out. The moment they brushed against the mirror's surface, an intense wave of cold shot through her body, rooting her in place. Images flickered across the glass. A young woman, her features eerily similar to Elara's, trapped within a swirling abyss, her lips forming silent pleas for help. Her eyes held an emptiness that sent ice coursing through Elara's veins. A voice, distant yet familiar, whispered from behind her. She was the first to be taken. Elara spun around, her pulse hammering in her ears. The shadowed figure from before now stood at the edge of the room, its form flickering between solidity and nothingness. Its presence was suffocating, pressing against her like an unseen force. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice barely steady. The figure did not answer. Instead, it lifted a hand and pointed to the mirror once more. The young woman within it grew more desperate, slamming her hands against the other side of the glass, as if trying to break free. A realization struck Elara like a lightning bolt. She's trapped in the mirror. The figure nodded ever so slightly, and then, without warning, the chamber trembled. The statues lining the room groaned as cracks splintered across their surfaces, their once still forms beginning to shift. The whispers returned, many voices overlapping, pleading, warning. Elara knew she had little time. She turned back to the mirror, heart pounding. If this girl was truly a lost soul, could she be freed? And if so, was Elara destined for the same fate? She reached out once more, bracing herself for whatever would come next. Chapter 5. Cracks in Reality. Elara could feel the weight of unseen eyes pressing down on her as she stared at the cracked mirror before her. The fracture that had appeared was no ordinary break. It pulsed faintly, as if alive. Each time she blinked, the crack seemed to shift, growing longer, deeper, like it was spreading through the very fabric of reality itself. A faint whisper snaked through the air, curling around her like cold mist. "It is weakening. The barrier. Breaking." Elara shivered, her breath visible in the chilled air. The room around her seemed less solid than before. Walls wavered like heat rising from pavement. The wooden floor beneath her feet creaked as if settling into a new shape. She took a cautious step back, but the reflection within the mirror did not move with her. Instead, it stayed still, watching her with hollow eyes. And then, suddenly, the reflection smiled. Elara's stomach turned. The expression on its face was not her own. It was something else, something twisted. Before she could react, the mirror let out a sound, a sharp, cracking echo that filled the air. A jagged web of fractures spread outward, distorting the image even further. Then, with a deafening shatter, the glass exploded outward. Elara threw up her arms, shielding herself from the flying shards. But instead of falling to the ground, the pieces hung in the air, suspended, glittering like stars in the dim light. Slowly, they began to realign, not as a mirror, but as something else. An opening, a window into another world. The other side was dark, endless, shifting like a storm cloud caught in slow motion. And within that swirling abyss, figures moved, shadowy, distorted, their faces blurred but unmistakably human. They pressed against the unseen barrier, their whispers growing more desperate. "Help us," one voice pleaded, "before it's too late." Elara took an uncertain step forward, her heart hammering. This was no longer about just her. The mirror held more than reflections. It held lives, trapped, waiting, hoping. But before she could reach out, a hand shot through the opening. A cold, blackened hand that did not belong to the lost souls. It grabbed her wrist, and suddenly, Elara felt herself being pulled. Reality cracked apart around her, and the world went dark. Chapter 6. The Language of Shadows. Elara awoke to the sensation of something cold pressing against her skin. She was lying on a smooth black surface, its texture like polished stone, yet it pulsed faintly as if alive. As she pushed herself up, she realized she was no longer in the labyrinth. The air was thick with darkness, but not the kind that came from the absence of light. It felt tangible, shifting and swirling around her like a living entity. She turned her head cautiously, taking in her surroundings. The space she was in was vast and endless, with no walls, no ceiling, just an expanse of shifting shadows. The silence was deafening, but as she strained to listen, she heard them. Whispers threading through the air, a strange and ancient language that sent chills down her spine. The voices spoke in hushed, overlapping tones, their syllables curling like tendrils in the darkness. Though Elara couldn't understand the words, the intent behind them was clear. They were speaking to her, or perhaps about her. A sudden rhythmic tapping echoed through the void. She turned sharply, searching for the source, and found herself staring at something, or someone, standing just beyond her reach. A figure cloaked in darkness, its form barely distinguishable from the swirling shadows around it. Elara. The voice was deep, reverberating through the very air, and yet there was something eerily familiar about it. She swallowed hard, taking a cautious step forward. "Who are you?" she demanded, trying to keep her voice steady. The figure did not answer. Instead, it extended a hand, and the air between them shimmered. Letters, glowing and twisting like living creatures, began to take shape in the void. They were unlike any language Elara had ever seen, yet somehow, instinctively, she understood them. "You are not the first, but you may be the last." A cold shudder ran down her spine. The last of what? The shadows around her pulsed violently, as if in response to her question. The whispers grew louder, layering over each other in chaotic symphony, and then, suddenly, the ground beneath her trembled. The figure took a step closer, and with that movement, the world around her changed. Elara gasped as she saw glimpses of other faces, reflections, hundreds of them, flickering through the darkness like dying embers. They were trapped, their mouths open in silent screams, their eyes pleading for escape. The realization struck her like a blow to the chest. This place was not just a void, it was a prison, and she had just stepped inside it. Chapter 7. Beyond the Mirror. Elara's body felt weightless as she drifted through the void beyond the mirror. Time lost its meaning, seconds stretched into eternity, and eternity compressed into fleeting moments. The air, or whatever filled this endless space, was thick, pressing against her skin like an unseen force. Around her, fragmented reflections floated in the darkness, flickering like candle flames. A whisper curled around her, soft but urgent. "You are not the first. You will not be the last." Elara twisted, searching for the source, but there was no one, only shadows stretching endlessly in all directions. The words weren't spoken aloud. They vibrated in her bones, resonating through the very fabric of the place she had fallen into. She reached out, and one of the floating reflections shimmered in response. In it she saw herself, not as she was, but as she could have been. In one vision, she was trapped behind the glass, eyes hollow and pleading. In another, she walked free, her hand grasping a key of light. A choice. A possibility. Her pulse quickened. "Who are you?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. The darkness pulsed, and from the shadows, figures began to emerge. Pale, translucent shapes with eyes like dying embers. Souls, dozens of them. Some reached toward her, desperate. Others simply watched, their expressions unreadable. We are the lost, bound by the mirror, bound by time. Elara stepped back, heart pounding. What do you want from me? A single figure drifted forward. A young woman, her face eerily familiar. When she spoke, her voice was both her own and layered with countless others. To be free. The mirror had been a prison, not just for reflections, but for the souls who had been trapped inside. And now, Elara realized, it was trying to claim her too. The darkness trembled, and suddenly something else stirred within it, something ancient, something powerful. A deep growl rumbled through the void, and the floating fragments of glass quivered in response. The figures recoiled, their glowing eyes filling with fear. Elara clenched her fists. She had come too far to let herself be taken. If there was a way to break the cycle, she had to find it before the shadows consumed her completely. Chapter 8. The Terrifying Reflection. Elara stood frozen as a ripple passed through the void, distorting the air like heat rising from pavement. In front of her, the shifting darkness began to coalesce, swirling and folding into itself, until finally it solidified into something unmistakable. A reflection. But it was not just any reflection. It was her. The figure in the mirror moved in perfect sync with her at first, mimicking her breathing, her posture, even the flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, the reflection tilted its head, and Elara did not. Her heart pounded as she took a hesitant step backward, but the reflection remained still, watching her with an expression that was almost amused. What are you?" she whispered. The reflection grinned, its lips stretching too wide, revealing teeth sharper than they should be. "I am you," it whispered back, but the voice was wrong, distorted, layered, as though multiple voices spoke at once. "I am the part of you that the mirror kept hidden, and now I am free." A wave of nausea rolled over Elara as the air around them crackled with unseen energy. The glassy surface of the mirror rippled like water, and suddenly the reflection stepped out. Elara stumbled back, her pulse hammering in her ears. The doppelganger's movements were slow, deliberate, predatory. It took another step toward her, and for the first time, she noticed the details that set it apart. The way its fingers twitched unnaturally, the way its eyes gleamed with something cold and inhuman. "You don't belong here," Elara forced out, her voice shaking. "Neither do you," the reflection replied smoothly. "But only one of us is leaving." With a sudden fluid motion, the reflection lunged. Elara barely had time to react as a force like icy wind slammed into her, knocking her to the ground. The world around them flickered, the void pulsing as if alive, responding to the battle between them. Elara knew one thing for certain. This was no mere illusion. This was a fight for her very existence. And if she lost, the thing wearing her face would take her place in the real world. Chapter 9. The Depths of Darkness. Elara barely had time to process what had happened before the world around her changed once more. The void seemed to fold inward, collapsing into an endless abyss, and she was falling. Faster and faster she plunged into the darkness, her screams swallowed by the silence that surrounded her. Then, impact. A cold, solid surface met her back, knocking the breath from her lungs. She gasped, sitting up, but there was no time to gather herself. The air around her trembled, and from the depths of the blackness, shadows began to stir. Twisting, writhing, they slithered across the ground like living smoke, moving with purpose toward her. A voice, low, guttural, ancient, echoed through the space. "You should not have come." Elara scrambled to her feet, heart hammering. The ground beneath her was smooth but not solid, more like a thick, shifting liquid. The moment she moved, it rippled outward, sending slow waves through the abyss. Then she saw it. At the edge of the darkness, something massive loomed, its form obscured by shifting shadows. Two glowing eyes burned like dying stars, locking onto her with an intensity that sent a chill through her veins. The presence was overwhelming, suffocating, ancient beyond comprehension. It radiated malice, a deep and consuming hunger. She tried to step back, but the liquid surface beneath her made movement sluggish. The thing in the darkness growled, a sound that vibrated through her very bones. The shadows that had been creeping toward her lunged, wrapping around her wrists and ankles like icy chains. Cold seeped into her skin, draining her strength. Elara struggled, but it was no use. The darkness was consuming her, pulling her down. Then, amid the chaos, a flicker of light, tiny, almost imperceptible, sparked in the distance. A whisper brushed against her mind, soft but insistent. "Remember who you are. Remember why you came." Summoning every ounce of strength she had left, Elara forced herself to focus on the light. It pulsed in response, growing brighter. The darkness recoiled, hissing. The massive entity let out a deep, reverberating snarl, as if sensing its hold slipping. Elara reached for the light, stretching her fingers toward it. The closer she got, the stronger it became, illuminating the abyss in golden hues. And then, the shadows screamed. Chapter 10. The First Ray of Liberation. Elara's outstretched fingers grazed the golden light, and a sudden warmth surged through her, dispelling the ice that had gripped her limbs. The darkness around her shrieked and recoiled, but it did not disappear. It lingered at the edges, swirling angrily, waiting. A voice, ancient and melodic, resonated in her mind. "You have the strength to break the chains, but are you ready to face the truth?" Elara's breath hitched. What truth? What more was there to uncover? Before she could form a response, the light expanded, enveloping her in a brilliant glow. She felt herself being lifted, drawn upward, until the suffocating darkness fell away, replaced by a vast chamber lined with mirrors, each reflecting something different. In one mirror she saw her childhood self, eyes wide with wonder. Another showed her standing before the cursed mirror, hesitation etched on her face. But the third mirror chilled her to the core. It displayed her reflection, except it wasn't her. It was the doppelganger still trapped, pounding against the glass, its mouth forming silent screams. Then, behind it, a shadow loomed. A figure emerged from the depths of the mirror, a tall, cloaked being with hollow eyes and hands made of swirling mist. It pressed a hand against the glass, and cracks spread across the surface like veins of lightning. "The guardian of the mirror," the ancient voice whispered. "It feeds on lost souls, and now it has set its sights on you." Elara turned to run, but the chamber was infinite, its mirrored walls stretching forever. The guardian reached through the cracking glass, its fingers extending unnaturally. The golden light around her flickered, weakening against the encroaching darkness. Elara's mind raced. If the light was weakening, that meant it needed her strength, her will to sustain it. Clenching her fists, she focused on the warmth within her. She would not be consumed. She would not be trapped. Raising her hands, she forced every ounce of energy she had into the light. It flared brilliantly, surging outward in a powerful wave. The guardian recoiled, its hollow eyes narrowing in fury. The cracks in the mirror sealed, and the doppelganger's screams became distant echoes. The light expanded once more, until all that remained was a single gleaming doorway in front of her. Elara stepped forward. Liberation was within reach, but so was the final truth that awaited beyond. Chapter 11. Echoes of the Past. As Elara stepped through the gleaming doorway, the golden light faded, leaving her in a vast, dimly lit hall. The walls shimmered like liquid silver, reflecting not just her image, but countless others. Faces she did not recognize, yet somehow felt familiar. Each reflection moved independently, their lips forming silent words, their eyes filled with longing. A soft whisper drifted through the air, like a distant melody carried by the wind. "Do you remember?" Elara's pulse quickened. The voice was hauntingly familiar, yet she couldn't place it. She turned, scanning the shifting reflections, searching for the source. Then, as if in response, one mirror rippled, its surface breaking apart like water disturbed by a single drop. A figure stepped forward from within the mirror, a woman draped in flowing robes that shimmered like stardust. Her face was partially obscured by a hood, but Elara could see piercing eyes filled with sorrow and wisdom. The woman raised a hand, and at her touch, the mirror solidified once more, revealing an image from the past. Elara gasped. It was a vision of herself as a child, standing before the very same mirror that had started this entire ordeal. But she wasn't alone. A woman stood beside her, gently resting a hand on her shoulder. The warmth of that touch seemed to reach across time, seeping into Elara's present reality. "Mother," she whispered, realization crashing over her like a tidal wave. The hooded woman lowered her hood, revealing a face Elara had only seen in fragmented memories. Her mother's eyes, deep, knowing, locked onto hers. "You were never meant to forget," she said softly. The mirror was not just a curse, it was a test. And now, the past must be set right. The room trembled as the reflections shifted, showing moments Elara had long buried. Her mother's desperate attempts to protect her, the warnings she had ignored, the night she had first touched the mirror and unknowingly sealed her fate. The truth hit her like a hammer. Her mother had been trapped here all along, a guardian bound to the mirror's power. Tears welled in Elara's eyes. "Tell me what I have to do." Her mother reached out, her fingers grazing Elara's cheek. "Break the cycle. Free them all." Before Elara could respond, a deafening crack echoed through the hall. The walls of liquid silver began to fracture, and a familiar darkness seeped through the cracks. The guardian of the mirror was coming. Chapter 12. The Shattering Spell. Elara barely had a moment to react before the hall of liquid silver erupted in chaos. The mirrors around her fractured, their surfaces splitting like spiderwebs as an unseen force pulsed through the chamber. The air turned electric, humming with raw energy. She could feel it vibrating in her bones, stirring something deep within her. A guttural roar filled the space, the sound of something ancient and enraged. The guardian of the mirror emerged from the splintered reflections, its hollow eyes locked onto her. Shadows bled from its form, seeping into the cracks of the world, threatening to consume everything in darkness. Elara's mother stood beside her, unwavering. "The spell must be broken," she said, her voice steady, "but it must be you who casts it. Only the one who holds both light and shadow can shatter the mirror's hold." Elara's breath came in ragged gasps. "I don't know how." Her mother placed a hand over her heart. "You do. The mirror's power is tied to you, just as it was to me. Trust yourself. Feel the truth within." The guardian let out another shriek, its form shifting and elongating as it reached for them. The shadows writhed, slithering toward Elara's feet like grasping fingers. She could feel their cold tendrils wrapping around her ankles, threatening to pull her under. Then she heard it, a distant echo, a whisper carried through time. The words were in a language she did not understand, yet they resonated within her as though she had always known them. Her mother had spoken them before. It was the spell, the one that could break the mirror's curse. Elara closed her eyes and let the words rise to her lips. At first they were uncertain, but as she spoke they grew stronger, clearer. The moment the final syllable passed her lips, a blinding light burst from within her, searing through the darkness like a supernova. The guardian howled as the light struck it, its form unraveling like smoke in the wind. The mirror shards around them trembled, then shattered completely, releasing the souls trapped within. One by one, the figures that had been imprisoned for centuries stepped forward, their forms growing solid as they crossed into the light. Tears streamed down their faces, their eyes filled with gratitude. Elara's mother smiled at her, pride shining in her gaze. "You did it. You have broken the curse." But even as the relief washed over her, Elara knew it wasn't over yet. The world beyond the mirror had changed, and something, some lingering force, was calling to her. The battle was won, but the final truth was still waiting to be uncovered. With one last glance at the shattered remains of the cursed mirror, Elara took a deep breath. and stepped forward into the unknown. Chapter 13. The Battle Beyond Time. Elara stepped forward, her heart pounding as the remnants of the shattered mirror dissolved into the air around her. But the battle was far from over. The very fabric of time trembled as the ancient forces of the mirror struggled against their unraveling. Shadows that had once obeyed the Guardian now swirled violently, twisting into monstrous forms, desperate to reclaim the power that had been lost. A deep, echoing voice filled the void. "You have broken the seal, but you have not won. The past does not let go so easily." Elara clenched her fists, feeling the lingering warmth of the golden light still coursing through her veins. She could sense the energy around her shifting, warping the space itself. Time was unraveling, collapsing in on itself. If she didn't act now, everything would be lost. The souls she had freed, the truth she had uncovered, even her own existence. From the void, figures began to emerge, ghostly remnants of the past, trapped echoes of those who had fallen to the mirror's curse. Their eyes glowed with sorrow and anger, their presence distorting the very air. They were warriors, scholars, and innocents alike, victims of the mirror's hunger, bound by forces older than time. "You must guide them," a voice whispered in Elara's mind. It was her mother's voice, gentle yet urgent. "They are lost between time and memory. They do not know who they are. Show them the way." Elara took a deep breath and raised her hands, the golden energy surging at her fingertips. "Listen to me," she called out. "You are free. You do not belong here anymore." The lost souls hesitated, their flickering forms wavering, but the shadows were relentless. They lunged, trying to reclaim the spirits before they could break away. Elara acted on instinct, channeling the light outward, forming a barrier of energy around the souls. The shadows hissed and recoiled, but they did not retreat. Suddenly, the air around her cracked like glass, and a vortex of swirling light and darkness erupted from the remains of the mirror's frame. It was a gateway, a final doorway between the past and the present, between captivity and freedom. Elara turned to the lost souls. "Go! You have to step through. Trust me." One by one, the spirits hesitated, then moved toward the gateway. As each soul crossed into the light, the darkness around them shrieked in agony. The mirror's power was failing. The final battle had begun. Then, from the depths of the void, the last shadow rose, a towering, shifting mass of pure darkness, the true heart of the mirror's curse. It lashed out, striking Elara with a force that sent her tumbling backward. Pain seared through her body, but she gritted her teeth and pushed herself up. She could not fail now. With one final burst of strength, she summoned every ounce of light within her, channeling it into a single blinding pulse. The vortex flared brilliantly as the last soul stepped through, and with a final, agonized wail, the darkness was consumed. The void collapsed. The battle was over. Elara fell to her knees, gasping for breath as the golden light faded. Around her, the space was no longer twisted, no longer trapped in time. She had won, but one question remained. Had she truly escaped the mirror's grasp, or was there one final truth yet to be revealed? Chapter 14. The Final Secret of the Mirror. As Elara stood amidst the remnants of the battle, the air around her shimmered, distorting like ripples on water. Though she had shattered the mirror's curse and freed the lost souls, something still lingered, something unfinished. She turned to the fractured remains of the mirror's frame, now glowing with an eerie, pulsating light. A sudden gust of wind carried a whisper, a voice neither threatening nor kind. The mirror does not create power. It only reflects what is hidden. Look deeper, Elara. The final secret awaits. She stepped forward, hesitant yet drawn by an irresistible force. As she reached out, her fingers barely grazed the fractured surface when the world around her twisted, pulling her into an illusion. Or was it a memory? She stood in a grand hall, its walls lined with endless mirrors. But these were different. Each one reflected a version of herself, some familiar, others foreign. In one, she was a child, clutching her mother's hand. In another, she was older, standing with a fierce determination she had yet to feel. And then there was one that made her breath hitch, her reflection, but with eyes unlike her own, filled with an ancient knowledge. "Who am I really?" Elara whispered, her voice barely audible in the vast silence. The reflection smirked, stepping forward as if to break through the glass. "You already know, don't you? You were never just a prisoner of the mirror. You are its last guardian." Elara's heart pounded. "That's not true. The mirror was cursed. An evil force. I destroyed it." The reflection shook its head. "You destroyed its corruption, not its purpose. The mirror was never meant to steal souls. It was meant to protect them. But when greed and fear twisted its magic, it became a prison instead of a sanctuary. And now you must decide its fate." The hall trembled as the mirrors around her began to crack. The visions flickered, showing glimpses of a time long before Elara's birth. A time when the mirror was revered, not feared. She saw people approaching it with reverence, seeking wisdom, glimpsing truths beyond their understanding. But then she saw the betrayal, the misuse of its power, and the moment it became a cursed object, feeding on those who sought it. The final secret, Elara realized, is not about destroying the mirror. It's about restoring it. A deep warmth spread through her chest as she understood what had to be done. She reached forward, placing both hands on the largest shard before her. "No more curses," she whispered. "No more stolen souls. The mirror will reflect only truth." A surge of light burst from her palms, coursing through the fractured glass, mending what had been broken, not into a prison, but into something new. The weight that had burdened the world for centuries lifted, and for the first time, the mirror shimmered with pure, untarnished magic. Elara opened her eyes to find herself standing once more in the ruined chamber, but now the mirror was whole again, its surface clear and inviting, no longer a trap, but a gateway of knowledge. She had uncovered the final secret, and she had rewritten its story. Chapter 15. The Soul's Redemption. Elara stood before the restored mirror, its surface gleaming with an ethereal glow. The once cursed artifact, now transformed into a beacon of truth, pulsed softly, as if alive with the wisdom of the souls it had once imprisoned. But she knew her task was not yet complete. The souls she had freed still lingered, caught between the echoes of their past and the uncertain path ahead. A soft whisper drifted through the chamber. "Elara, what now?" The voice was filled with longing, a mixture of hope and fear. It belonged to a young scholar, one of many whose essence had been trapped within the mirror's depths for centuries. Elara turned to the shimmering figures surrounding her. "You have all been prisoners for too long, but your journey is not over. The world has changed, and your place within it is yours to choose. You are free now, free to walk the path you were meant to." Some of the spirits hesitated, their translucent forms flickering. "But we have no place in this world anymore," a warrior murmured, his spectral armor glinting with a faint glow. "Our time has passed." "Time is not a boundary," Elara countered gently. "Your wisdom, your knowledge, your stories, they are still needed. The mirror has been restored, but it is no longer a prison. It is a guide, a bridge between past and present. You do not have to fade. You can remain as guardians, watchers of history, guiding those who seek the truth." A hush fell over the chamber as the souls absorbed her words. Slowly, one by one, they turned toward the mirror. As they approached, the mirror's light swirled, embracing them in a golden radiance. Some stepped through, crossing into the beyond, while others remained, their forms becoming less defined, their presence merging with the energy of the mirror itself. Elara watched as the last soul made its choice. A gentle warmth filled the air, and she knew the mirror had truly been redeemed. The burden it once carried had been lifted. As the light settled, a voice, her mother's voice, whispered in her mind, "You have given them peace, and in doing so you have found your purpose." Elara exhaled slowly, a sense of fulfillment washing over her. She reached out one last time, placing her palm against the mirror's smooth surface. It no longer felt cold or cursed. It felt alive, pulsing with the knowledge of ages. With one last glance at the chamber, Elara turned and stepped away. She had rewritten the mirror's fate, and now it was time to forge her own path.